I pulled the switchblade out of my back pocket. I stuck it in his neck. Chairs went back. What the fuck is going on?
Welcome, everyone, to the Andrea Giovino Show. Andrea, author of Divorce from the Mob, motivational speaker, crime commentator, and TV personality. For those of you who don't know Andrea, who have maybe never seen any of her shows before, I wanted to get a little bit more into the background of her history, how she grew up, how she ended up in this mafia crime lifestyle, and what brought her into it, how she became affiliated with these men. So, Andrea, tell us a little bit about your background.
Hi, everybody. So for the people that don't know me, I grew up in Brooklyn. I come from one of 10 children. My dad was a truck driver. We were very poor. My mom, of course, back then, women didn't drive. They didn't have a career. None of us had an education. So because we were so poor, each of us had to take care of the next younger one down. So my mom was running card games for Crazy Joe Gallo. She was, friends with him in the neighborhood, good friends. He knew her, Dolly, her name was, and he knew that we were struggling. And he said, hey, you want to make extra money, Dolly? Can we use the basement of your home? Because it was illegal back then to have the guys come, and we have card games back there. With this, when the guys would come, she would make food. And as little kids, probably as young as 6 years old, we would help her bring the cups down, the food down. And I guess because we were so poor, and my dad was a very hard-working truck driver. He was never, I don't even think he owned a suit. They would come with the suits and the long coats and the fedora hat and the pinky rings, and they would be rich.
Did she ever explain to you or lay out to you that there was like something different about these men, that they were in a lifestyle? Did she ever speak on that? Or
well, I mean, we were raised in a sense of these were the men that would provide for you, because I guess she had like such a hard life. She might have been like a little bit bitter over her life, but back then you never hear about divorce or anything like that. So I just remember looking at them and thinking, wow, they're rich. I'm talking, we were poor. Like, I had holes in my shoes. Like,
Yeah.
we didn't have anything. We were street kids.
Yeah. And what would she teach you in regards to like how to act towards these men when they would come into your house?
Oh, well, we were taught to cater. Like my sisters and I, that's what we do. We cater to the man that you're with, and, go bring them their coffee or their food. But even with our husbands, or when we gotten married, you kind of cater to the husband. You are stay home, cook, clean, have babies. And that was your role.
Right.
It wasn't like today.
Right. So you said you weren't educated. You didn't have a formal education. Tell me about that. Why?
They just didn't send us to school. My dad didn't believe in education. He said, if you go to school, you learn bad things. So we stayed home. I have a 7th grade education. And I kind of self-educated myself because I always loved to learn. I like to learn about everything, even today. Mm-hmm. So I always was a great reader. And then as I got older, I remember, I don't know, I was in my 20s, and I invested in, back then it was called the Britannica Encyclopedia. And I would look at all the different things and learn about like art and opera. So I kind of just really worked on myself a lot to better myself.
So while your mom was teaching her daughters to cater to these men and wait on them, what was she teaching her sons?
Oh, they were criminals. Like, we were a criminal family. I mean, like, go out, steal. We were stealing food, because that's how poor we were. My dad didn't make enough money to even provide for that. So, we would go out, the younger ones, so we wouldn't get arrested, and go steal down the street. It was a little place called Freeman's, a Jewish place. And back then they used to leave the bottles of milk in cartons outside. And me and my brother Carlo, my sister Ginger, and my sister Monica would run and get them and run back to and bring them back just to eat,
Yeah.
But my brothers, they were like at 13, 14, maybe robbing cars, car radios, and, starting out that way. And then robbing cars. And so,
And your mother encouraged all of this?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there was always like you go in a house and there were tons of car radios, like, you know, that they would sell them, that people would want them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it was criminal. I mean, my mother had, you know, there was just a lot of, I want to say a lot of criminal talk I grew up with. So that was normal for me, like to understand the criminal life. So as I became a young girl, maybe 15, 16 years old, that type of personality, which I saw at such a young age, didn't scare me.
Right.
You know, and my first interaction, of course, there were a lot of guys in the neighborhood, but I was 16 years old, and I always, you know, wanted to go out, and there was a club on. The club was called Revelation, and that's how I met my first husband, Toby Perfetto, and Robert Scarpacci, which they own Scarpacci Funeral Homes, which I'm friends with up until today. You know, great friend. We were friends for years. You had to be 18 to get into the club, and I was 16. And back then it was 18 that you could drink, which I never drank anyway. I still don't drink as of today. You know that.
Yeah.
Robert got me in, and we became very good friends. And through Robert, I got a lot of street smarts through him. And through him, I met other people. So there was Bobby DeChico. They had these after-hour clubs, and we'd go after the club. You know, after that club would end, you know, we'd go to other people's after-hour clubs. And I learned, you know, like I was hanging around a lot of the street guys back then. Then I want to get into...
And your mother, growing up, she wanted you to be with street people.
Oh my God!
Like
yeah.
to start.
Well,
like,
I didn't.
like your first husband. She wouldn't have encouraged you to date.
Yeah, I didn't feel comfortable with anybody other than them because, you know, I felt very intimidated. I didn't know the language of an educated guy.
Yeah.
Not saying that an educated guy wouldn't like me. I was very attractive when I was younger, so it wasn't that at all. It was me. I didn't feel good about myself. I felt good with them.
That's what you were used to.
Because what I was used to, what I was comfortable with.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just for my viewers to understand how I picked all those guys and made all the mistakes I've made in my life, that's what I was exposed to in the neighborhood. If you come from Brooklyn or any of the 5 boroughs in New York, you know, back then there was a lot of crime.
Can you give us a little bit more background on like what the culture was? Because I think to people who are outside of that lifestyle, didn't kind of grow up in that type of neighborhood, it is a little bit maybe sounds scary or intimidating, but for you and somebody who grew up in that neighborhood, these types of men, these types of personalities weren't intimidating. It's kind of like a culture where you took care of people. You took care of the people in your neighborhood.
We all took care of each other in the neighborhood. Yeah, I mean, like you would never be able to come into Brooklyn like outsiders or try to bother a girl or something like that because everybody watched out for one another, especially the mob guys in the neighborhood. They would never let anybody of theirs be hurt or anything like that. It was actually, you know, as much as it's a big world, it's a very tiny circle, you know, and they stay very close. Like my mom didn't really have girlfriends. It's like her family, they came over from Italy, and a lot of them migrated in the area in Brooklyn. So she had a really big family. She was one of 16. So you go down the street, you go down the block, you go around the block. It was my aunts and uncles.
Okay.
So my name was Silvestri, Andrea Silvestri, but everybody called me Andy. And the Silvestris, like, kind of everybody knew those are the bad kids. Those are the kids they'll fight. If you start with one, the whole family comes after you. So that's kind of how it was for us growing up, you know.
Yeah.
We always stuck up for one another. We all, you know, jumped in and, you know, fought for one another. Like, you could fight amongst each other, but don't let anybody else say anything about that sister or brother because they'll tear your heart out.
Right, right. So then your first husband, he was involved in...
Well, my first husband, Toby, he was, his cousin was Jimmy DiBartola. He was killed. He was very close with Eddie Leno. Jimmy D, they used to call him Jimmy D-Bob. Jimmy DiBartola was my son Toby's godfather. He was my best man at my wedding. He ran with Eddie Leno, and he was a very tough street guy. And I remember at my wedding, my dad said, like, because we didn't do drugs or anything like that. That he saw like a pack of drugs or something like that. One of them, and they're doing drugs here. You know, what the hell is she doing? Getting involved with these people. And
So your dad, hold on, your dad was taken aback by this, but your mom was.
my mom was my dad went to work every day, so he really didn't know what my mom was doing. My mom was arrested, you know, she was arrested when we were younger for having the card game and, you know, through Crazy Joe Gallo and all. My mom never opened up her mouth or anything. She went to court with all the kids and the judge was like, oh God, throw it out. You know, he wasn't going to deal with all the kids going. She was very dramatic, bringing all the kids in. But the street guys loved her. She was tough lady. Everybody loved her. When she passed away, they all sent beautiful flowers, dolly arms, they used to call her, because she loved to play the slots and she used to just keep pulling her arms. So they called us dolly arms.
Okay.
Alley Shades, the guys all sent her beautiful flowers and stuff like that.
And your dad was a hardworking truck driver. Do you think he would have had the same outlook on your future as your mother did? Do you think he would have
No, my
encourage
dad
it
was
the
a
same way?
my dad was a very honest, normal man. No, he wasn't like that, but
So she was the one who groomed
she was the criminal.
kids.
Yeah. She had the criminal gene. She was the one. She came from a large family. Her brothers were like that. We saw a lot of violence growing up because her brothers, she had 9 brothers. They used to come to her house because she had all the kids, and they were like mason layers or brick layers. And if they weren't working, they'd come over our house, and if they play cards, they get into a fist fight, but they're beating each other up with pots and everything. So I grew up with a lot of aggression.
Do you ever feel resentful for how you were raised?
No, I really don't, because I think
For
that
being pulled out of school?
well, I would have loved to have an education, but I think, and I look back now because I had a lot of therapy in my life, and I understand that I worked on myself a lot. She didn't know any better. She was a product of her environment. She came from a family of 16 children. When her parents came over from Italy, some of her siblings were left over in Italy, and then they came over years later from Bade. So, you know, she didn't know any better, you know.
Yeah. What do you think is the biggest lesson that your mother taught you, coming from a street woman?
Fend for yourself. She taught us that at a very young age. I'm a survivor. We're all survivors. I'm a very, very strong person. Nothing's going to get me down. Nothing is ever going to scare me. She would teach us that if somebody fights with you or somebody starts with you, don't come in this house crying. I don't care if you pick up a rock, a brick, a stick, whatever. You better hurt them, because if you come back to me crying, I'll hurt you even more.
Yeah.
So that's what I grew up with, a lot of aggression and
your
fighting.
friends
I
in
was
the
a tomboy. I was a tomboy.
Yeah.
I was a tomboy. I was always fighting. I was a very angry kid.
So you were raised in a tough neighborhood, on the streets by a tough mother,
Very tough.
and you were always comfortable around your
like
neighborhood.
as we get into it later on, tough where, you know, we didn't sit around the table talking about making gnocchi. We talked about murder.
Yeah.
So, you know, and that happened.
Yeah, we'll get into those stories later on your show, but I just wanted to give people a little bit of a background of where you came from, how you became so comfortable with these types of personalities and lifestyle, and the neighborhood essentially that you grew up in.
Yeah, the neighborhood was a tough neighborhood in Brooklyn, and everybody knew everybody. So, you know, and then as my life went on, after my first marriage, Toby went to prison. I had a child. I was struggling. And I'll never forget, Robert Scarpacci, I ran into him on 86th Street, and my son needed shoes, and he said, it was called Stride Right at the time. It was shoes for children. And he said, come on, I'll take him. We'll go get him the shoes. I'll never forget that. Robert was very generous. He didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
I was just his friend. He was like, come on, I'll help you out. We'll go get the baby the shoes. And because he knew my husband, I met him with him, and I was struggling. So, and then at that time frame, I had an apartment on 85th Street and 20th Avenue, and I was working. And Toby's parents would watch my son while I worked on the weekends. I was working in Manhattan, and at a restaurant called Gaetano's, and I knew how to survive. I always knew how to survive. I was always a survivor. So,
What did you do after Toby?
after Toby, I was, like I said, I was working, and then what happened was I had rented this apartment on 85th Street and 20th Avenue, which I still talk to people that lived in that building with me. And my friend Vinny Green, which I grew up with also, his dad was a street guy. Everybody knew somebody or somebody's family was involved in organized crime.
Yeah.
He said, "Well, you know what? I know you're working hard and everything. We're opening up an after-hour club, on McDonald Avenue. Maybe you want to do that. You'll make much better money. These guys tip big." So I was like, "Sure, I'll do it a couple nights a week." He says, "I can give you 2-3 nights a week." I said, "Sure, I'll do it." And with that, that's how I met Frank Lino. But before we get into Frank Lino, I had it very hard when I was living on 85th and 20th. Below me, across the street, there was a club of guys. And it was Joey Man and Jimmy Man. They were, I don't know what family they were in. I was very young at the time. Like I said, I might have been like 22. It was before I met Frank Lino. And my brother Frankie always gave me a switchblade to carry because I was traveling back and forth for my job in Manhattan. I'd take the train into Manhattan because the train was right over by 20th Avenue. So all the guys would sit outside in the summer and, they'd playing cards or they'd be drinking beer out of their, brown paper bag and stuff like that. And there was this one guy, Frankie Botts, they called him, because he was crazy. He always used to look at me, bother me. So it was a hot summer day, and I was up in my apartment, and my son Toby was sleeping. At this point, he must have been about 3. And I had the door open because I was cleaning, and he was at my door, this guy. And I was like, I was like, "What are you doing here?" And he was like, "Oh, I thought like I heard you was selling bikes or something." I said, "I don't even know what you're talking about," but he looked high. I said, "I don't sell bikes or anything like that. I go to work." I said, "And my son is sleeping." I said, "So, move." So he put his foot to the door, and he was very crazy. I saw the fear in it, like in his eye. He was crazy. He said, "I thought maybe when you look at me, you like me. I wanted to come in." I knew he was there to rape me. I knew that. And I said, "No, I didn't ask you to come in." He pushed the door even further. And I knew my kid was in the back room, and I was really scared. So I outsmarted him. I said, "Listen to me." I said, "My son is sleeping." I said, "I'm all sweaty." I said, "It's summer. You see I don't have air conditioning. Let me take a shower. Give me a couple minutes. And you know what? Come back in about a half hour." I said, "And, we can hang out together and everything." Because I wanted to get him out of there.
Yeah.
Because I needed to think.
Yeah.
I get my neighbor to watch, which I'm still good friends with them as of today, Julie. And I told her, I said, "Julie, you got to do me a favor. You got to watch the kid." I said, "Because I got to straighten this situation out. This guy, he came up here. I know what he came up here for. I got to put an end to this."
Yeah.
All right. I get dressed up. I had beautiful long blonde hair. I put stilettos on. I'll never forget, I had tight white jeans. I put a tight blouse on, and I was always busty. All the men were outside. He was standing there. I went over to him, very sexy. I said, "Hey, Frankie," I wanted to make it known he came up to my house.
In front of everybody.
I said, "You just came up to the house." He goes, "Yeah, I thought." I says, "I didn't invite you up to the house." I went closer to him. He says, "Yeah, I know, but I thought you and I could get together." I continued to go closer right up to him where my body was on his and everybody was looking. I pulled the switchblade out of my back pocket. I stuck it in his neck. And I said in front of everybody, "You motherfucker, you ever come near me or my kid again, I'll slit your motherfucking throat." He goes, "Get the knife out of my fucking throat. Get the knife out of my fucking throat." With this, I'm poking him more. I said, "You understand that's my kid. You came up there to hurt me. I will fucking kill you." Just like that, I told him. Get Joey Man and Jimmy Man, chairs went back. "What the fuck is going on?" That's a story. That is fact. "Andy, I'm sorry. What the hell happened?" They knew I was just a regular hardworking kid. They took him in the back. I heard they broke
Yeah,
his
what did they
legs,
do?
and he was in the hospital for 6 months. Don't ever do somebody like that into the neighborhood. This girl don't bother nobody. She takes the train. She goes to work. Nobody bothers her. I knew how to fend and fight for myself, because if I didn't do that, he would have raped me in front of my kid. So I've always been a fighter. I'm never going to stop fighting. Never, ever, ever.
I think your mother raised you to be that way.
Yeah. So, and everybody knew. Everybody that knows me from the neighborhood knows if one of my brothers were having a fight, I'd jump on the guy's back and bite them and fight them. That's just me. I might not look like that, but that's me. I'm never rolling over on anybody. Nobody's going to do that to me. So.
All right, I think on that note, we'll wrap it up.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody, for watching. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to Andrea Giovino's show, her YouTube channel. Make sure you comment. Let us know what type of content, stories you want to see from her in the future. And stay tuned.
Thank you. Thanks for tuning in, guys.